Hey, Damien. Ooh, you're in the dark. No. We hebben een attendee. And there he is. Welcome,
Yeah.
Damien.
Welcome again. Just trying to look for some more lights. Ugh. It's going to be ugly.
You should have your party mode up.
I should have what?
Party mode. Look, it's party.
Oh, right.
Even got popcorn.
Uh, uh, so up. Ooh.
It should work as we practiced.
Yeah, it should.
So when you share your screen and you make the presentation, there you go. I got a full screen.
Yeah. So what is the actual location? Antwerp?
For this event.
Yeah.
It's Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. But yeah, just keep
Benelux, Belgium.
just keep it. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's not important.
No.
So what else do I need? Yeah, it's already shared, so you've got that. And what else?
Well, we got 5 more minutes.
All right. Oh, you're late.
If you wanna get something to drink, or you wanna get some food, or
So drink is here already.
pro tip: go for the little room before you speak.
Oh, that too. No, that's actually a reflex now. Anytime I have to talk, I have to go before that underwater. But I might actually grab a bite before I will. Yeah, so I will grab a bite. But sound is good. We check the screen, so all is fine.
Okay.
Just
Well,
yeah.
then we have a countdown. I will block your screen for now because I want to make the introduction, and I will give you the presentation rights
Okay.
the moment that we're back.
When it's useful, it's fine.
Yep.
Yep. Good.
So
That. And as I said, I'm going to go away for just a moment so I can grab something to eat. But I'll be back.
yeah, it will be like a 10-minute introduction about who we are, what we do. So
I'll be back before.
all right. I got you on my screen, so whenever you return, I can see it, and that's my cue to announce you.
All
All right,
set.
all right. See you in a bit. Welcome back, Damien. We got a few more minutes, so
What we need. So Vim is not here yet.
well, it's a little bit slow for people to join. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading the word from Clément. That looks like the problem.
All right. Let me make the manage group, contact members. Total contact members. All members subscribe. Right. That people. the password is. Okay. And I'm going to submit this. So, okay. Paul, can you check if the mailing is received by you for the meetup? I just communicated the password.
Okay. Do you know where you send it to me? Which email?
And
Oh, it's coming that more people are here.
okay, yeah, there you go, there you go.
Okay, Vim is here.
All right, I see people coming in.
Yeah, what is the? Okay, I'm going to find that through Twitter. I'm looking for the link to the to the meetup.
If it's the same with you as with me, you will have the URL in your address bar.
Okay, so
That's
PHPBenelux click meeting.
yeah, that's
Okay,
the
so
direct link.
and the other one is the YouTube one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually grabbing the links from the Twitter account, so that's good.
Let me take some notes for next time to communicate the passwords. Yeah, made a great note of it. As people are coming in, and ooh, looks like we have a whole bunch now. Yep. So I think it's good that we get the introduction started as people are coming in. It's yeah, the usual stuff. Nothing really that special. So everyone, welcome to the PHPBenelux meetup for November. As you can see, I'm in a party mood because by all considerations, November is the release date of PHP. Damien has the elephants. We have the elephants here. Um, I also have like stickers to be given out. So yeah, it's going to be a PHP explosive party. Um, so with that, let's get into the housekeeping notes. First of all, thank you all for joining us again. I know it's November. You want to spend time with family, so I'm very, very appreciated that you're joining us instead. So in a few moments, Damien Segui will talk about modernizing your PHP with Exacat. If you haven't tried Exacat yet, it's an amazing tool that will give you so much insights that you are going to be astonished by it. So it's going to be a yeah, very, very interesting talk. I definitely gonna take some notes here. And then we have a speaker change. And the second speaker for tonight will be Wim Godden. I already saw him in the audience, so hi, Wim. the why and how to move to PHP 8. Since it's a PHP 8 party, we all going to have like an amazing time discovering what Wim has to say about moving towards that. Wim is also the owner of Cube, and he will Cube is also our sponsor for tonight. So he will be part of the raffling at the end. So of course we have the PHP community as a whole to thank in our sessions. So the PHP community is not just us; it's like all the local user groups that are being represented. So we are very grateful that they have taken the time to create the community, and we just take it now into a virtual area where some of the communities are not able to. So yeah, awesome. Thank you, speakers. I mean, you're spending your evening now sharing the knowledge, and even though it seems like you're talking to inside a camera on your screen, it really means a lot that you share this knowledge with us, and we're very grateful that you're participating in this event. So thank you very much. Of course, Cube is going to be the sponsor of the magnificent elephants that you can win at the end of the session. But that's not all. If you haven't seen the pictures yet, we have an amazing box full of gifts for you, the winner. So this is the box that you will get. It's filled with goodies. So if you want to stick around, you can participate in the raffle. That said, Into IT, thank you for picking up the bills for getting us the platform and the equipment to get this all on the road. Without your support, this wasn't possible. So thank you. Okay, so the elephants are part of Cube. So thank you, Cube. Thank you, Wim. You're amazing. And with no further ado, I think it's time for Damien to get started. Maybe you want to have a few messages before you get started. We still have like 2 minutes to spare.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I mean, this is I've been already invited to the PHPBenelux conference. It's the first time I have a Meetup presentation, so I'm very, very honored to be there tonight. I have to admit, I would have loved to visit you in real life, and so I'm a little disappointed that tonight it's just remote, although it's better than nothing, so I do appreciate that. And I do also hope this is going to be just the first step for the actual Meetup. So this is an invitation for later.
Definitely. We already discussed this up front. We would love to get back in person meetups and have you involved with the community. So yeah,
We stay in touch.
of course we will.
Yeah. I don't hear you anymore. Maybe it's me. Ooh.
Yeah, I muted myself.
So I'm the only one now. I can talk and say whatever I want. I don't even see the chat. So apparently, Michelangelo has even kicked himself outside of the meetup. Not exactly sure what I shall do at that point, so just going to keep you entertained a little bit.
And
he's back.
Yeah, I'm back. So you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah.
There it is. And can you start the presentation?
There we
And
go.
you can. So, no more help for me. It's all for you now.
Well, thank you very much again, Michelangelo, for the introduction, for the whole group to organize this evening together. Even if we're like remote, as I said, given the circumstances, it's really good to be able to come a little bit together and share a bunch of knowledges. This is going to be a little special presentation for me because I'm usually used to take the question along the way, but well, I won't really see them during the presentation. So please, if you have questions, put them into the chat or in the special question section. Michelangelo will collect them, and we'll take time at the end to actually review them and answer them in particular. So I'm just sorry that we don't have time to interact together right here, but I'll stay after that anyway, and I want to listen to Vim also, so that's going to be an important moment. So modernizing PHP code, obviously we're in the last stretch before the grand apparition of PHP 8, which is supposed to be at the end of the month, so hopefully it's not going to be too late. But even if it's like a few days late, who cares? I mean, we're just as excited as everyone to actually get this new version. So, of course, upgrading and modernizing your code means getting ready for PHP 8. That's going to be part of the subject. This is just the circumstantial aspect of modernizing your code, because you can also just modernize it because you remove accumulated debt and little things that are in your code. So that's another aspect of the modernization that shall be taken into account. And I would say the last aspect of modernizing is extending your knowledge. So it's not just about the code and the way it's currently in such a state, but it might be also about yourself extending your power and your control over the code. So that's exactly what we're going to see with the help of Exacat, which, even though it doesn't look like so, is actually hard at work reviewing maybe not your code, but at least my own. Yeah, so this is a tool that actually can work while I'm doing something else, and that's probably the initial reason for the creation of Exacat. And nowadays, it's still doing that. So I'm the one going away and drinking beer with community, and it is the one working hard. So for those of you who haven't seen me already at the conference in January or later, maybe at other conferences, I'm Damien Segui. I am the father of the elephant, so the plush toy elephant. I think Chrysaor is somewhere, so this is the oldest elephant in the community, but it's probably hiding or taking a nap, so I can't really tell you where it is. And the presentation tonight is based on my experience of building the static analysis tool for PHP. So what you're going to hear is both things that are coming from the research and development, so things that are completely new and probably a little advanced, and also from all the rearguard battles that we have to lead anytime we actually take over some code and have to make it progress to better futures. So static analysis, I think nowadays people are getting used to it. So it's the fact that we can actually check the code and find bugs in it, even though we do not run it. I would say the main difference, main opposition is dynamic analysis, which is when you run the code, and static analysis doesn't require that. It actually starts with what you call code, source code, and what we call text file, because want it or not, before being given to PHP, this is only a piece of text, nothing more, nothing less. And PHP will actually read that. It will what we call tokenize it, so turn it into little pieces that can be understood. It will be linted to see if it's consistent. It will be reviewed for syntax. And once it has reached that point, actually there are two different usage of that semantic version of the code. There is, of course, PHP, which is its own client that uses the code for execution purposes. And in between, it will actually do some static analysis on itself, in particular before pushing the opcode to the cache. It will do some optimization like pruning useless expressions or removing extra variables that are not useful. And it will actually then do the execution. Now, you've got to understand that PHP is organized toward extremely efficient execution. So the whole process from text file to execution should be as fast as possible. And although PHP does that extremely well, this is the main constraint it has to follow. While on the other side, we will take over the job starting at the optimization level and run static analysis that is completely out of this constraint of time. We have time to read it. We don't have to execute it very fast. So we can read it, understand it, and decide what we want to do with that. So it's a complete different path. It doesn't have the same constraint, and it also doesn't have the same realization. So when we want to do this analysis to modernize the code, we're going to take a look at three different aspects of the code. So of course, as we said, getting ready for the next novel, because this is the moment of the year where we want to do that, preparing for PHP 8. We're also going to take a look at what happens when you want to adopt larger projects and advanced solution in PHP, and where a static analysis can help you. And finally, we're going to touch the esoteric aspect of understanding your code, where everything has a meaning more than just a syntax that is going to be executed. So let's start immediately and consider going to the next level. And the next level is actually not going to be PHP 8, but I'm going to be very bold and move to PHP 8.1. So maybe you're not familiar with that, but working on migration tools, we have to be always on the lookout for the new versions. Since PHP 8 has been feature freezed in July, well, at some point we have to, it means that the number of features is completely finished and decided. So anything new, anything that is not within the perimeter of PHP's 8.0 is going to be in 8.1. So we can actually start talking about 8.1 because there's a branch for that. I mean, there's a branch for PHP 8, while master is now for 8.1. This is just a detail. But if you want to get ready to 8.1, well, you still have the same process where you want to check the compatibility and see where the features are working. So in particular, when preparing for PHP 8, we use the linting, which allows you to check if the code is compatible with PHP 7, 7.4, or 8, different things like that. But static analysis allows us to go one step beyond and detail everything that is below, which are features. It happens quite often that some features do lint. They are kind of compatible at the syntax level, but they will not execute. And sadly, this is something that we have to wait for PHP to run it to actually know it, unless we can spot the pattern inside the code and decide exactly what we have. And here, this is one of the reports provided by Exacat that checks for all the features that could be found inside a PHP code and will tell you with which PHP version it is compatible. So the first level, the first line, you can see that 8.1, 8.0, 7.4, 7.3, those are the compilation, the linting checks that have been done. And just below, you see all the features that are being introduced and which version they are, which helps us understand how this code is going to run on different PHP versions. It's actually Exacat on Exacat. So here you've got the PHP compatibility for Exacat. And I have to admit that this afternoon I wanted to have a nice presentation. So I took it on my own code, and I realized that the current version of Exacat has a coalesce equal operator that slipped in. So you know the coalesce operator, it's the double question mark, and the coalesce equal has been introduced in 7.4, and it's a double question mark and equal. It's a very slight mistake, right? It's very simple to make. It just probably slipped my mind where I decided to write that code, and probably I was like focused on some other aspect and not remembering exactly which version introduced that operator. So suddenly it's going to break my code for everyone below 7.4. At least I know it, and I'm going to take a better look at that just to resuscitate the compatibility. Maybe not down to 7.1, but at least a little better. But just being able to spot exactly the features helps a lot. In fact, when you take a look at that, you realize that PHP has been running and providing a huge amount of features, because the first part of the table that I've been showing is the one that are being used. So those are the list of PHP features that have been introduced at some point, somewhere between 5.2 and 8.0, and that are kind of introducing in the code these backward incompatibilities. I cannot use anything in 5.7 anymore, in 5.6 anymore, because, well, there is the coalesce operator, or there are the scalars or type hints that are being used. So it is completely impossible to go back that old. But there's also this bottom of the table where you will see all the features that are not being used by Execat itself, by the source code, that are, of course, not providing any backward incompatibilities. Now it's not a competition to use all the features and or to discuss if like anonymous classes are important to use or not. I personally do not even use any. I don't see the point. I mean, if I write a class, I shall give it a name. But that's beyond the situation here. It just tells you that at each level of each PHP version, there are new features, and there's also backward incompatibilities. So again, we get a full detail, a full report of the compatibilities, things that are still working in PHP 7.4 or older at least, and that will not work anymore. Currently, I think we reach 21 different rules that are dedicated to migration to PHP 8, coming from PHP 7.4. As you can see on the previous slide, there are actually migrations that are for every minor version, middle version of PHP since 5.2. So if you run all of them and you want to jump from 5.2 to 8.0, well, first, of course, good luck. But you can also get all the migration in between. So each of them will actually have a description, and you actually know exactly which are the problems that are going to bite you. So here, apparently, I still have two problems of optional parameters. When you give a default value at the end of a method, and there's a bunch of mismatched parameter names. So parameters from one method that is overwritten in a second method, and the second method does not use the same parameters. That's going to bite anytime you want to use, not every time someone else will want to use named parameters in PHP 8. So that has to be fixed before the version. But here, this is a complete review of the code. Of course, if we go on the warnings, we will get the exact advantage of a static analyzer. So we will have the file and the line number of the problem that was detected, so we can directly go and spot on, see where we have to do some more diagnostic or just fix right the way on the code. Now, if you want to go to PHP 8, that's the one. I mean, backward incompatibility is the first one you want to check, because currently you're stuck on 7.4 or worse. But you kind of in that place, and if you want to move forward, well, of course, you have to get ready for everything that PHP 8 does not accept anymore. Now, this is, of course, going to be the talk of everyone, and probably the number of workshop will happen at PHPBenelux about preparing your code to be ready. But the thing that we usually miss is that those roadblocks are, preparing the code forward, but we also forget that we have everything to look backward, and that's what I meant initially in the old in the agenda of this presentation. You have to look also backward, because currently we want to be prepared for PHP 8, but we also cannot already use any of the new feature of PHP 8 because, well, apparently they're not really available in PHP 7. Otherwise, that would be not a migration. So we have to look forward and remove all those backward incompatibilities, but we also have to look backward and wonder, how much did I miss? Imagine the situation where you actually publish an open source framework or library, and you still have to support older version of PHP. That means that any new feature of PHP 8 will not be available until all your users have moved to the newer version. And that might mean that all features will suddenly be discovered once you decide to move toward them. So there is a complete section of Exacat that is dedicated to suggestions. So the spirit is very, very different from the previous one, where we actually look for issues in the code and say, oh, hold on, be careful. If you don't do that, you're going to be stuck. No. Suggestion is far more relaxed. Suggestion means, okay, here is a migration point that you should take into account, but if it's working like that, then probably you don't have to do more than that. And here you've got a short list of the different suggestions that happens to some piece of code, but you don't have to act immediately, and maybe you can learn a few tricks along the way. So, for example, here is something that could be in the code, like you have a comparison, condition on a variable. If you already know that this variable is going to hold an integer, then you should probably upgrade the double equal to a triple equal. Now, I don't see yourself and I don't see your face on the other side of the keynote presentation here, but I'm pretty sure that you're all like nodding, saying, oh yeah, I know that. And then you wonder, where shall I do the same in array? I mean, in array takes two arguments, the element, the value you look for, and the array that you're looking into. But what can I do? Can I do a triple equal there? Actually, it's not always known, but yes, you can do that. There's a third argument inside in array that allows you to have strict comparison instead of relaxed comparison. Is it known? Well, probably most of you know that. Is it used? Well, probably like me, most of you forget about once in a while, or they actually need it. But most of the time, we can actually move that to use this third argument, and just like moving and adding the third equal to a double equal, using the third argument is an improvement, both in performances and in security. And the last one you've seen below, and it was on the previous slide, it was switch, PHP 8. I guess I'm not going to step on Vin's presentation, but switch, which currently use only a relaxed presentation comparison of the values, will actually be able to move to a strict presentation of comparison. So maybe moving from match to switch to match will also be an interesting point. And that's going to be literally an upgrade that is related to migration and modernizing your code with the PHP versions. But as I said, some of the feature may be really old and just like slipped through your fingers when you actually read them, because like the version you were working on was not available. So here are at least two of other little tricks that I like to mention that's not always known. For example, you can mention the third argument of explode. So the two first arguments are very well known. Please use them in the right order because PHP 8 will actually enforce them. But explode will use the two arguments, and then the third one is a limit on the number of arguments or the number of elements that explode is going to produce. So if string, in this example, is actually made of 500 commas, and you only want the two first one, then explode comma string 2 will only return 2 elements in the array, which are exactly the one you want to use with list. And if someone tried to stuff too many of those commas, well, explode might work too much to then later get rid of most of the array, while using the third argument will prevent some extra and useless work. Even if it's not injected or you don't have a security problem, this is a little gain in terms of performances because you skip some useless work. Another example that's often overlooked is the for each you have below, where the array is, as usual, expanded into, oh, this is not just one variable here. It's actually an array that is expanded on, each element of the array is expanded into an array of values. So instead of ending up, looping over for each and ending up with an array of elements, then you can directly assign those values to straight variables and use them in a much easier way to understand later. Again, you don't have to believe me and think that's a clever trick, or maybe you think, just who cares about that? I can use an array later and have a little more cumbersome syntax because I'm used to that. Fine, this is just a suggestion. Maybe you'll just learn something and make your code better, or just ignore it and everyone will be fine also. Finally, based on those upgrades, the other trick that is interesting from Execat is that not only it can tell you what is to be upgraded or maybe modernized, but it can also show you how to do that automatically. That does not work all the time, but when you use Execat in conjunction with Rector or PHPCS Fixer, everything that Execat can find, can actually be configured for Rector on CSS Fixer and then actually applied directly. So not only we can spot the problems, but can also give the work to someone that will make everything run right on the first run and not let you do the fix manually. Now, to be honest, we also have some updates and some research and development at the Execat level to do the same kind of fixing the code. So that will probably change in the future. But at the moment, taking advantage of other tools that are widely available and extremely efficient is always a good solution. Migration. We said we don't want just to spot bugs and hunt for them, but we want also to provide support for advanced technologies that are in PHP. And there are a bunch of them. I'm going to give you 3 examples. And the first one might actually look like a little old, but that will be covering the visibility reviews. Now, if you remember, of course, when you have a class, you can actually have an option for visibility that is applied to properties, methods, and actually since 7.2, we can also have them to constants, meaning that you can decide if the constant property or method is visible from the class as private and from the hierarchy of class, the family of class as protected, or from everyone as public. Generally speaking, this one is an easy something that you have to review later because there are the visibilities may be adapted there at some point. They may be relaxed for quick code fix at some point, but it's always good to come back and see what is the actual usage. So there is a part of the report in Execat that gives you a suggestion about the visibilities. And for that, Execat will actually read the whole code base and see how constants are used. So this is a very different approach than from conception. Okay? Conception will basically look at how the code shall be used and decide if it's actually a property that should be private, protected, or public. While here, Execat will take a look at the way it's actually used and make you a suggestion of what you should do. So here you can see for the classes, there is the name of the class. So there is all and ambassador that are mentioned on the left. And then you've got the name of the classes of the constant, for example, in particular, but there's also a bunch of properties below. And for each of them, there is the current status, and there is also suggestion of what you can do. So here, there's no suggestion. Everything is fine. Everything is at the level where it should be. So it means that in that class called all, there are file extension and file name, which are all correctly used because they are used obviously by external classes. So they cannot be more than just public. But it might be interesting to realize that at some point, the class being only used locally could be moved to private. And the decision actually to detect is between the detection of the usage of the constant and the actual configuration. So at that point, you can take a look at those configuration and decide, yeah, I know that this function is, this constant shall be only private, but maybe I'm going to keep it protected for, future use. Again, this is just a suggestion, but the work of reviewing the code and making sure that everywhere it's used one way or the other is extremely cumbersome, except when you have a tool that actually does that for you. I will even point you towards another column that's interesting. So you can see known and public, protected, private. The final column is actually constant. It only works for properties, but Exacat is also capable of detecting the way that properties are being used. And in particular, if the properties are only read after one initial default value or an initial constructor's simulation, then the value can actually be turned into a constant. And it's probably better for the code to actually realize that, for example, frequency is an actual constant and never modified, then you should probably turn the property into a constant so that later, well, it's actually read correctly from the code. So there is the visibility suggestion. There is also the fact that you can turn some properties into constants and make your code a little more mutable than it is before. So this is the way we can do this one. And of course, the other one that you probably want to have as a review beside visibility, which probably is not such a hot topic anymore, it's kind of understood and well spread, is of course strong typing. And strong typing proceed exactly the same way than visibility review in the code, be that the Exacat will take a look at the code and make suggestion for every possible type placeholder, and suggest you which one to use. The result is here. So you can see on the left the class name, including its namespace. And then there is a breakdown on the right. Well, as you go to the right, first there are the properties. Properties are defined by their name. The middle column in the blue section is actually the one that is the actual specified type hint in the code. But on the far right, you will see the suggestions. So if you read the first one on home timeline, there is a property called name, and this name could be a string. Very simple. There is another property called description, which could be a string. And this class use load. Load actually has a parameter which is already configured as an array. So whenever there is already a specified type hint, then Exacat skips the suggestion, but there is no return type, and the return type could be no void, which helps you decide that this function will actually never return anything, or maybe it could return something else. This example here is actually returning only one suggestion per item, I would say, but sometimes it's difficult to decide. So maybe you have several return values. At that point, either you can decide which one you want to choose, because of course you know the code better than Exacat, so you can decide which one is possible. You can also decide to wait for PHP 8 and use the union type so you don't decide. Okay, it might be a weaker solution. I have to admit that I like the idea that one type is being returned, and we've got lots of possibilities to return several types, even though we can only specify one very, explicitly. But at least, again, this is a suggestion. So machine does the hard work of looking for the possible types and returning the one that's interesting to you. That saves you all the searching inside the code. So the spotting itself is done by either following the usage or following the calls. So the method signature is, of course, the usage. So you have got to look inside the method and see how any parameter is actually being used. That will tell you how much, if it's one type or another. The other thing is, and again is important, is the way the method is called. Because if a method is systematically called with a string, even though it's, behave it like an integer later, then maybe it's better to make it a string. So that's the kind of feedback you can get, and for which you have to decide which type you want to use. There are also other analyses, of course, related to typings in general, maybe classes or interfaces, in particular insufficient types. When someone configure a type, an interface for a type, but then later ask for a property on this object. So that's insufficient. There is the contrary when you're requesting a very large type while not using too many of it. There are some of them who are inconsistent between functions and methods that are overriding each other. So there are also specific analyses that are dedicated to problems in typing itself, not just suggestions. But in general, just looking at the way PHP itself requests a number of types, and on the way that the arguments are taken and then relayed to another method, you can go from 60 to 80% of the code that is really easy to type. Here, the machine is going to do the most of the work for you, and you just have to select them and see them, add them to your code. So the decision process is still part here. There's no way we can decide and not making a mistake by choosing the type. So use the machine as doing the grunt work, and then just finish the thing that's easy for you. And again, and now moving to another modernization of the code, which are definitions, file definitions. And this one requires a little step back to have take a look at the code. And the current way we work on PHP is kind of resumed here, summed up on this diagram. So your code actually draws its power from, I would say, three sources. It has to take advantage of, PHP itself, because there's a standard amount of functions, constants, and functionalities that are coming from PHP itself. There are also extensions which share with PHP the fact that we see their API, but we do not know what's behind. Okay, probably could be written in PHP itself, but most of them is written in C, C++. But we just see the names of functions we call and what kind of argument we send them. Of course, that does not apply to component frameworks, libraries, call it the way you want. But those that are helpers for any application you're writing. You don't want to write bare bone PHP unless you have a specific target in mind. But most of the time, take advantage of something that has been written probably better by someone else, and that allows you to go fast. And our code actually is built on top of those three elements. So there are elements that are prepared for us that we can just use, and get some result fast. But in terms of code analysis, it means that PHP is not the only provider in terms of features and capabilities. We have to rely on other people to give us that. And in the same time, it means that we have to be careful about how our code is being made compatible with them. So the compatibility with those API actually boils down to understand what are the connectors, the things that we expect from them, and how we actually are going to use them. Of course, there are functions. PHP has like more than 4,000 of them, so it's a lot. We don't know all of them, but there are some favorites. There's also the constants, which are probably as numerous. And then you may consider classes, interfaces, traits, namespaces. All of them are parts of things that, well, when you name them, you have to avoid using the one that already exists. Or when you want to use them, you have to know exactly how it works. This actually may apply to global variables. It's maybe a little more old-fashioned, but global variables may actually provide you with interesting element, and I think about, for example, like WordPress, which is still providing a large number of like database connections and common infrastructure values through globals. And in the rarest situations, configuration directives might actually be what the extension is providing. Each of them might actually bear a name. That's an easy one, but type nowadays, it's a lot more fashionable, and a default value. And that makes quite a lot, because if you have to consider that you want to be compatible with Symfony Symfony framework, you also have to consider the version with which you want to be compatible. Every of those compatible versions will be different in some point. There will be new classes, old classes, deprecated ones, new functions, new constants, and such and such. And if you are checking your own code with those, well, you have to know exactly which one of them is working and which one has disappeared from one version to the other. And at that point, you understand that the description of the API is the strategic part. It actually behaves just like you want to analyze your own source code, meaning that you start with, I would say, the framework by itself. You analyze it to extract all the detail inside that version, and it gives you what is often a stub, and which I actually start calling more definition file than a stub. So stub is just the empty shell of the framework that can see all the classes still being available. I mean, all the signatures are all created, but the code inside is just completely empty, so that we just have the interface between the framework and the actual code being executed. But anyway, this can be done before, and once you have the stub, or if you don't want to provide that as a PHP script, you can actually provide that, for example, as a JSON structure, which only gives you the information and not the PHP structure. Then once you have done that, you can start reusing it, in particular giving it to static analysis tool, so that they can say, oh yeah, I recognize this is a bold CMS a piece of code, so I can remove a number of false positives based on this source. And at that point, we actually started providing stubs for a lot of those frameworks, because in particular, you can find stubs easily, for example, for Laravel or Joomla, because there is a vibrant community that provide them, and they are very well integrated in the IDE world or in other static analysis tools. But there's a number of other projects for which it's a little harder to generate those stubs. So based on the experience that we have to read the information from code and extract that, we have two ways to produce either those PHP stubs or the JSON version of them. And the JSON version of them is just a question of format. Basically, we extract the information from the the source code, and either we'll render it as a PHP piece of code or as just a data set. And we have started collecting them into one repository, which is execat stubs. It still bears the old name of the stub, but with a simple simple contribution. If you're interested to have some frameworks that do not currently have any support, I'm interested in getting more of those under control. Which we especially need, the presentation of the framework or the library or the composer component and the different important middle versions. So we will cover mostly middle versions, but possibly later more, just in question of storage at the moment. And from there, all those descriptions of frameworks will be available, both for usage and, of course, execat can make a usage of those, but other static analysis tool can make usage of it. And it also opens an interesting field of analysis, in particular when you can have those evolution, middle versions of a framework that will introduce or remove unexpectedly methods. I've always been pleased at reading the Laravel migration documentation, because they're always very careful at marking or mentioning that special classes has been removed or methods has been removed and added. And it's not always the case for all the frameworks around there or all the CMSs that we have in PHP. From here, we have a tool that can collect this information, and just reviewing two JSON files, we can make the comparisons and maybe have, for example, just a report saying, okay, be careful, that many methods has disappeared, that many classes have disappeared, and here are the new ones. We could probably make stats just like we do for PHP in general. So there's a lot of information just beyond the stubs that could be extracted here and help us get a much better understanding on how we are living the evolution of frameworks and the way they go into the future. So just not modernizing our own code. It also means we can help modernizing someone else's code. And I'm going to take a short break. Good. And we're going to enter the last part of the code modernization. And we've currently been focusing on very technical matters. We've been focusing on syntax. We've been focusing on structure and the way frameworks work. And the last, I would say, realm where we actually don't spend much time, but that's always very interesting, is the meaning of the code. And the meaning of the code happens to be the moment where I would say the business logic, the targets, the objective of the code meet the actual syntax. And there are spaces of freedom inside the PHP code where you are not compelled by, the way the documentation tells you to do FTP login before actually doing the FTP list and then FTP get. No, that's not those names, but there are places where you can actually choose the name. And this is all those elements like variable, parameters, classes, traits name, constants name. We have to name things. It's not typical of PHP, but this is a name thing. And you might actually ending up with the HTTP referer syndrome. So you may know it or not, because now it's been so long that people tend to consider this is true. But referer is actually a mistake. There's a spelling mistake, and it lacks a third. Well, it's not the second one, but it lacks a fourth air in the third position. It should be a referer with two R's in the middle. But what happened is that when you name things, when you use them, well, it was written there. There was no spelling. Well, there was a spelling check on the RFC, but it didn't cover this word, so it went unchecked until the RFC was actually completely voted, and it was too late to change. So that's how you ended up with a spelling mistake in there. And you've got to consider that when you're doing a name in PHP, and that's why it's so difficult in the programming language, is that, well, you have to choose it very, very early. It will stay because everyone is going to use it, and so it's not going to be something you can change easily. But at the same time, no one's going to check them. I mean, no one's going to check them unless we really want to check them. So one thing you can do is called inventories. Inventories is when you actually collect different data from the code, which are usually scattered across the code base, but suddenly you can collect them and put them in one place. That includes, of course, for example, variable names. That could include parameter names. It's always a very interesting way to understand that, the same variables get different names at different places in the code. That's always weird. But once you've gathered things that are supposed to be the same type together, you can now compare them one next to each other. And I will give you this first example of the inventory of error messages. And believe me, if you don't do that, you're going to have a really, really good laugh the first time you do that. So error messages are the ones that are being created when you have an exception, for example. Oops, sorry. So an exception, there is a message that will probably not end up, hopefully, on the screen of the user, but probably in the log, so you can later review it. But there's also a bunch of them which are just, okay, at that point I need a message, so I'm going to put it there, and it might be in a die or in exit. Review them. I mean, I've got so many situations when you have gremlins were there. What the hell is this error message? I mean, someone thought it could be useful. It's probably something that's extremely basic, meaning that it's like very low-level problem. We try to connect to a database, it doesn't work. We've got a read problem, so there's a through that's been there. But just take a look and check them, because something like in the middle here, you have unallowed access. I don't know who's going to be helped with that, but in a controller, it makes sense. Just that it's probably not very interesting. So that's the meaning of the code. Another one that I enjoy doing is collecting all the regular expressions. So here under the regular expressions, you can see on the left, there is the regular expression itself. The column of numbers in the middle is actually the number of times this expression is being used. So that's interesting. On the right, you will see all the files where this expression is being used. So what we have here, obviously, is a bunch of unique regular expressions. Okay, that's interesting. Sometimes they are repeated everywhere. And if you take a look at the last one, you can see it is repeated in 2 different files, although it's a pretty complicated one. It's not that obvious that just by creating it, you will end up with exactly the same in 2 different places. So that might be a copy and paste. If it's a copy and paste, then probably you can consider that maybe it would be worth making it into a constant, for example, something that could be reused. And this is why regular expressions and inventories are so interesting. I've seen so many times things like you can see on the second level or the second line, someone who's trying to detect the extension of a file. So do we really need an extension, a regex for that? That's already a good question. Couldn't we use like base name or paths file to extract this information in a much more efficient way? That's the first question. The second situation I've run into several times is that here we can see that there is GIF and JPEG and PNG and SVG. So there are 4 classic file extensions for pictures. Okay, so far so good. But if you find another regex, which is now covering only the third first, and then another one that only covers the 2 last, isn't that a bug? Isn't that means that at some point of the application, we are covering some of the pictures and on the other side, not? Something is like imbalanced. I don't think it's a systematic bug. So it could be completely valid that the application does not handle all the same format everywhere. But it should probably raise questions about why this happens and why you could not make it a little more consistent across the whole application. And just reading all of them also makes you understand how many you have in the code. Personally, I checked it on Exacat. I've got a little more than 300 different regex. Nowadays they are all different, so I'm kind of satisfied with that. But still, means a lot. Regex is definitely a staple case of functionality that I use, and they are important, but maybe a little too much. So it's just something I've realized just looking at the number of them in the code. What can we do with inventories? Well, you can let your mind run wild, because there's a huge number of things you can find. URLs, email, path. Why is it that some paths, which are obviously the same, are completely dynamically created, while others are completely hard-coded? That's a source of bug, in particular if you decide to change the architecture. Date format, is it always the same, or is it different, or does it include the local as necessary? Hashes values, sadly enough, too many of them are hard-coded, so it's sometimes interesting. Encryption types is also another one. Encodings in the one being used, for example, for MBString. That's interesting to know that maybe it's different ones are used in the code. So inventories are always fun, because it makes you realize that your code either covers a lot more ground than you think, or maybe it's not that consistent. So moving on, just learning things. Stats is always interesting, although I'm going to run out of time, so maybe not too long. For example, parameter counts. If I ask you, and again, I cannot see you through the screen, but you're probably, usually people will answer that a maximum parameter count between 4 and 6 is the right one. And that's exactly what we see when we actually take a look at the statistics from methods. So here we've collected different methods across 1,700 different popular PHP frameworks and applications, and we have the repartition of the number of parameters. If you really want to see, well, what you see first is, of course, that between 4 and 6, you drop from 75% to, let's say, 30%, a little more than that. So this is really the moment where people start deciding that, yeah, it's a little too many. I mean, 6, 7 is getting too much. But you've got, of course, also to check that the worst of them is 57. So usually when I'm on a real conference, I actually need to open the door so we can check this graph that actually really, really large. But 57, yeah, the other thing that's really fun with this 57 is that all the arguments on this method were typed in. So every single argument, every single 57 argument were typed in, meaning that you probably have to create another 200 different, call another 200 different parameters to create those 57 objects, which in turn will only give you this class. So it was like completely crazy. That's the worst I've seen. But more reasonably, that will give you, the profile will differ depending on your application. And that will also give you an idea on how you're entering the parameters. So this is interesting stats, which are not always obvious, just like, for example, the statistics of the number of variables. So although parameters, so the number of parameters is something that usually is agreed upon, like between 4 and 6, and it's kind of vague, but it's not exactly precise. But since there are very little ways to count the number of local variables, well, I would say people are just letting that go, and there are large numbers of local variables. So here you can see the number of variables being used inside one method. Most of them, of course, are using one or two, maybe even zero, just relying on these or relying on global variables and parameters. But you can see that we are up to 51 and still counting. So it's 51 local variable inside a function. That's quite a lot. And as far as I remember, this statistic goes to 157. I don't even know how you can find so many names. This is possible, but it seems quite a lot. But 157, you should have broken them down earlier. So, but anyway, this is interesting to see. And when you have the stats, then it can, drives you toward the places in your code that really, really requires a refactoring rather than wait for it to happen. Of course, stats can be again coming in various flavors. We have the API, so we can detect the framework and that are the framework and the version it's being used. That can apply to extensions. And there are lots of interesting tidbits, like the number of the referencing levels, or just the number of the depth of multidimensional arrays. Sometimes it's really scary to realize that in the passion of the moment, you can have 7 levels of arrays and you never thought it was difficult. Well, I mean, until 6 months later when you have to understand that code anyway. But always interesting to know. And I'm going to finish that with semantics, just the words. I have to admit that for a long, long time, I've always wanted to have a spell checker for variable names inside execats. I have always failed to do that, but I still have a bunch of elements that are interesting, and I want to share a few of them with you. Things like the first one, you see, where you have typed int with an array. Now, I want to emphasize that it's int, okay? So the S here is kind of giving away the fact that there are several of them, and then the whole package of int is now inside an array. So it kind of makes sense, but be careful, because on the second one, this is also a piece of code I've found, and the code is actually an int, and the int is called array. And to be honest, I thought it would not exist. And out of 1,700 plus applications, I have managed to find 2% of them that are using some kind of crazy thing, like it's typed as an array and then it's called an int or something like that. There are also vicious situations like the third one, where it's not an exact type, but it's a word. I mean, a message, it really sounds like something that should be a string or a piece of text, not an array. Now, well, okay, maybe you've decided that the message is an email message, and then it has a title, and it has a body, and it has attachment. Okay, but maybe you should make it a real class instead of a generic array. That's just an idea. Or you can end up with those strange situation where there is a string class. So it's a class that's actually made into a scalar. And just to finish on a light note, consider the last one, and how long did it take for you to spot the problem? The problem is not on the string. I mean, XML config could be a string or not a string, but you've got to consider that if you read it too fast, you will not spot that XML config has suddenly turned into config XML inside the code. Now, this is very simple code, so okay, everything is available. But when you have a few million variables into your application, and some people have written it config XML, and then at the other side of the code, even if it's not related, you suddenly have config XML the other way. Just this switch could, cost you an hour before realizing that the two of them has been written, because switching from one part of the code to the other will make you forget which one is which, and then that might be difficult. Again, those are semantics problems. You can give crazy names to your variables. You can give them, one-letter names and just go away with it. So it's not going to prevent your code from working. It's not going to be. It could be completely waste of time just to rename variable and still have the same behavior. Definitely. It also might cost you a lot of cognitive pressures, and it means also losing lots of time just trying to understand what exactly is there. So finally, the last one I have is a readability index, which has been extracted from the linguistic realm. So you should actually, for example, make shorter sentence with smaller amount of word. And in PHP, that means that you should use less operators per expressions. So when you do the ratio, the number of operators you have within one expression, that can help you decide that those big monsters with 7 multidimensional arrays and a bunch of operation in them is probably too complex to read, and you should probably make it smaller. So that's an interesting point of view that we can harvest from other scientific fields around PHP. I'm going to finish. I see that it's almost an hour, so I kind of feel that Michelangelo will soon ring at my door and kick me out of the presentation. So whatever you've seen here, it's documented, and that's definitely one of the important thing I like about Execat. So everything has been documented and presented, so you can take a look at there. If you want to download it or install it, there is the website, and there is it's open source, so you can go on and download it directly from GitHub. That works too. There, if you just want to keep a few piece of knowledge and wisdom from this presentation. So get ready for PHP 8. Even if you're not moving to PHP 8, preparing your code is going to help you. So lint it, prepare all backward incompatibilities, and that in the process will help even your code that's still running on PHP 5 to get better. So that's always a good piece of advice. Always also remember that even at my level, where I've translated the documentation 3 times, and I've spent reading. I've read more than 1 billion lines of code of PHP. You learn something different every month. So use your knowledge, use a static analyzer to review your code and help you, pinpoint exactly things that you can reuse later and understand better. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being here with me today, and I'll stay here for questions.
Hey, Damien.
Oh, you're here. What? No.
A round of applause for you. Thank you very much. This was a very, very insightful presentation. Thank you for sharing this knowledge. Besides some of the comments, I was keeping an eye on questions, but I haven't seen it. Let me just activate the Q&A mode just to be sure. If people have questions, then yes, let me know. Damien, one thing from me. You offer Execat as open source. People can download it, run it, but you also provide a service, right? Can you tell me a little bit? Can you tell the audience a little bit about that service?
So, Execat has always been open source, so it's still brought back as open source. Now I want to make a living out of it, so we have a SaaS version. So Execat is also available online, so you can actually take advantage of of it directly, and we run it from our side, so we can check the versions, we can upgrade, and we're also working towards this enterprise version to be in advance. So all the new features will be on this version, and then it will later be brought back to the community once we have passed this amount of time. The other thing we provide as a service, beside training and installation, if you want to start with Exacat, I mentioned there's a lot of rules. We have more than 1,700. I think we are reaching 1,800 soon. Don't run them all at the same time. Even just making a choice and deciding which one are important to you and which one you want to use. It needs some explanation. So we provide help to do the first setup, or even do the specific development that may be tailored to your code.
Awesome. All right. Well, like I said, not many questions. We do have a question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Let me go to Q&A. This is from Ike. How would you compare Exacat with PHP Stand or Psalm?
Okay, so we they're both very, very different, and okay, so there are two different things. The first thing is that PHP Stand, Psalm, I would include the third one, which is Fan, is far more popular in general than Exacat. So yeah, you don't know it, although Exacat probably started very early like Fan, and we've been like the oldest one. So that's very so different things, the common things, everything is open source, the four of them. So that's one important part of the message. They are all running on PHP recent versions, and they mostly provide machine-based reports. So if you run Fan, you're going to have text. A lot of text. It's kind of dry, but it's very reusable and can be injected into CI. So all of the four elements of the four static analyzer also work as CI. Now, where it's different, I think Exacat's rule shines where it has lots of rules, and it's also less into. It's more into suggestions and less into just pushing you toward. Oh, this is a bug, we should not go into production with that. So it's not just focusing on things that should stop if your code is wrong, but it also gives you elements for a more panoramic view and be able to decide how to evolve even your conception or your architecture without just spinning too many errors at the same time. Generally speaking, because I run all of them all the time, they are complementary. They will not find the same things. So at that time, well, I don't suggest running the four of them, but they will get different tools. So give it a try, find the one that suits you, and then use it.
Okay, well, very nice. That was basically the only question that I saw in the chat. Well, yeah, well, people, you will still hang out also for Wim's session.
I will. I'm staying there.
Okay. Let me go a little bit back to the presentation. Well, we say 10 minutes past the hour. It's now 2018, so 25, so 25 minutes past the hour. Let me see if I can change this text, and
oh yeah, you have to change the text, right?
25 minutes past the hour. No, I cannot change it. Okay, well, yeah. There you go. There you go. I hope it's clear for everyone.
If you had a Sharpie, I could write directly on your screen,
You too. Also, Sharpies. Ah, come on. No. Thank you very much, Damien. Thank you all for being here for the session. Don't run away. We still have Wim, and we also have like a massive raffle that we can throw out at the end. But you have to be present to win. So go have a drink. Go to the little room. Wash your hands. Get some air. We will see you in like 5 minutes. Okay. All right. See you in
Right,
5 minutes. And we're back. And I see Wim is also joining us. Hello, Wim.
Hi.
Everything okay there?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So
Okay.
it's basically the same setup as we had in the preparation. So the only thing is that we now have like massive amount of attendees, and we have people watching on YouTube Live. So say hi to everyone.
Hello.
What are you looking at?
Well, the interface is different. I'm looking for the screen share button, actually. Oh, wait.
You have the two green buttons, and you have the red button saying screen share.
Got it.
There you go. All right. Let me do the introduction first, and then we will jump back to your presentation.
All right.
Okay. By the way, Juliet waves hi. So.
Hi, Juliet.
Well, I can hold back. So, Wim, take it away. Tell us the why and how of moving to PHP 8. And here's your presentation. Take it away.
Right. Thank you. So, as already announced, we're going to be looking at what PHP 8 is all about, and how you can move in a slightly smoother way, possibly, but especially what to look out for, and how we can automate certain things. So really quickly, well, you already know my name. That's my Twitter handle. I'm from Belgium. So for those of you watching locally, I'm somewhere close by. Yes, place of beer and chocolate, of course. I'm from a town very close to Antwerp called Hemiksem. We have a beautiful abbey, a couple of castles, all very nice. I started the company about almost 20 years ago. Actually, at the end of this month, we'll have our anniversary, sadly not with a big party. And I've been doing open source for the last 20-something years. And I wrote things like PHP compatibility, which I'll talk about a bit later. And I've been doing talks like this for quite a while. Okay, so there's two parts to this talk. Part one is why should you upgrade to PHP 8? So we'll be talking about the features that are new, modified, things that will be removed, and so on. Bad reasons are, of course, oh, cool, we have a new toy, let's play with it. Yeah, that's always fun, but that might not be always a good idea to suddenly upgrade in production. Annoying your sysadmins might sound fun, but not always a good idea either. Part two, well, we're going to talk about when you want to upgrade to PHP 8. You'll notice that, well, there's some compatibility issues, obviously. And we'll have a look at how we can automate some of that. Don't expect me to provide you a miracle cure here. There is no magic way to automatically solve all compatibility issues, but at least we can go quite far, maybe 90% of the way. Normally, I would do a show of hands and ask what everybody's running on production, but that's going to be a bit tricky, or I would have to do it through the chat, but that's going to take way too long. So we're just going to skip that, and we're going to look at the actual numbers. So here we can see the numbers from W3Techs from 2015, 2018, and the most recent ones. And what's really obvious there is that PHP 5 currently still accounts for 41.6% of all running installations, which is quite a lot, especially given the fact that PHP 7 has been out for several years now. What's even worse, of course, is that PHP 4 is still running, and even PHP 3 still accounts for about 0.1% of all servers out there. The most worrying part, of course, are these installations. There's a lot of them that are still running PHP 5. They have not been upgraded. They have not had any security fixes, most of them. So these are very old installations that are publicly available on the web that are unsecured and that should be upgraded as soon as possible. PHP 7, it's going in the right direction. As you can tell, 7.0 and 7.1 is dropping. So that means those people are upgrading to 7 dot something later. So that's a good sign for the future for when PHP 8 comes out in a couple of weeks. Quick recap of what we've seen the last 10 to 15 years. Quickly going to go through that. So what did 5.x give us? Namespaces, late static binding, we got closures, we got a lot of improvements in terms of garbage collection. We had GoTo, not everybody's a fan of that, of course. We had the MySQL native driver, lots of performance gain, the short array syntax, we had traits, we got a built-in web server for development purposes, we got binary notation, we finally got rid of registered globals, magic codes, GPC, and safe mode, which was never really safe to begin with. We got generators, the password hash functions, so that not everybody's writing their own hashing system anymore. And we got built-in opcache. And that's just a few of the things we got in 5.x. If we look at what we got over the last couple of years in PHP 7, huge performance increase. Memory consumption dropped by anywhere close to 40 to 60% in some cases. We got scalar type and return type declaration, including nullable types since 7.1. We got the null coalescing operator and the null coalescing assignment operator, the spaceship operator, the several functions to generate random data in a cryptographically secure way. We got improved error handling, with most of the errors now actually catchable. We got FFI for communication with C libraries. Not a lot of people using that for now. Maybe in the future that'll change. Everything underlying PHP is now using the abstract syntax tree, which also meant that there were some incompatibilities in PHP 7.0. Overall, PHP 7 got a lot better consistency. There's still work being done on that, but it's improved a lot in 7.0. And a lot of things were removed or deprecated. PHP 8 continues down that path of improving. The number of improvements were, I guess, most people expected that because of PHP 7 being such a big release that we wouldn't see that many changes. But in fact, I'm amazed at how much has changed in PHP 8. So a lot of the deprecations from PHP 7, of course, have turned into stuff that's been removed. We got a lot of new features, a lot of syntax changes, functionality changes, and of course, some deprecations of things that will be removed in PHP 9, which will come in a couple of years probably. So some stuff was deprecated in PHP 7, removed in PHP 8. One of them is the PHP 4 style constructor. So if your code still has that, then it's time to definitely remove it. Replace it with a normal constructor like we've seen since PHP 5. It's no longer allowed to do static calls to non-static methods. That is not going to work in PHP 8 anymore. Other stuff that's deprecated in 7 and now removed is create function, the magic autoload, and the each function as well. And then this is a fun one, actually. There's been a serious change in the operator precedence. This is not something that's been removed, but just modified. So if you look at this code, we have two variables, A is 5 and B is 3, and we echo the sum is, and then A plus B. Now, what you'd expect is that this would output sum is 8. In reality, this is going to output nothing more than 3. Actually, not the string 3, but the number 3. And that's the case in PHP 7. In PHP 8, this is changed. This is the warning that you would get in PHP 7.4. And now in PHP 8, the output will be actually sum is 8. So what you would expect. But But this does mean that the operator precedence has changed. So in certain cases, this could influence your code, of course. Another thing that's no longer allowed, and most people weren't using that, but you could actually access array elements using curly braces. That was deprecated in PHP 7 and is now removed in PHP 8. So that will just not work. So if you have code that uses curly braces to access array elements, that's not going to work anymore. Okay, let's talk about what is new or what is changed in PHP 8. I'm not going to discuss every single thing because, as I mentioned earlier, there's so much stuff that's changed that it's just impossible to mention all of that in like 45 minutes. So one of the much hyped functionalities in PHP 8 is JIT, or just-in-time compilation. What is JIT? Basically, when PHP runs through your code, it will keep track of any so-called hot parts of the code. Basically, those are parts that PHP will run through a lot, that are accessed a lot, and it will try to optimize these specific parts so that it can execute them as efficiently as possible. Now, this is really useful for things like mathematical calculations. The basic example, the typical example, is a Mandelbrot, where you have a lot of recursion and we have basically the same code path being executed over and over again. It has a very limited gain on typical web application code, where you have a request coming in, where you access some data from a database, where you process it a little bit, and then you generate some output for the user. There's not a lot of code being run a million times, a billion times, and so on. Does that mean that just-in-time is useless for PHP? Not necessarily. PHP is used for a lot of different things nowadays, and so it is definitely worth looking into. In the future, it might be possible to write more mathematically based applications in PHP, whereas in the past you would never do that. Also new in PHP are union types. So now you can specify, instead of specifying one specific type for a parameter to a method, for example, or specifying one specific type as a return type, you can specify more than one by appending them basically with a pipe. So in this case, we have a function that has some class or another class as a variable, and it can return either an int or a float. You can, if you want to specify whether that a parameter to a function is nullable, there is, of course, the nullable type, which we had in PHP 7 already. But you can also do a pipe and then null. That's exactly the same thing. This is not valid. You cannot return void or int. You have to choose whether you're going to return nothing, void, or return something of a certain type. But choosing both of them is not valid. However, of course, if you want to return int or null, then you can use a nullable type. That works perfectly. Named arguments are also a feature that's available in PHP 8. What does this do? Basically, we have a method here where we have three parameters called 1, 2, and 3. The third one is nullable and has a default value of null as well. And what we can then do is call this parameter and say, okay, 1, the parameter called 1, we're giving it the value 5. The parameter called 2, we're giving it the value Steve, and the third one, we're giving it the value Alexander. So you basically use the names of the parameters specified in the method definition as a placeholder to in your call, basically. This also means that you can do this. There's not a lot of difference here, except that I switched the last two parameters in my call, and this will work perfectly fine. So the order doesn't matter anymore at this point. I can specify them in whatever order I want, as long as I'm specifying, of course, the ones that are mandatory. I added a fourth one here, which is a string. And as you can see, when I call this method, this function, then I am actually not specifying the third one, which is perfectly fine because that one is an optional parameter. It's nullable, so this will work fine. This works as well. You don't have to name the parameter. So you can perfectly fine just get rid of the parameter as well. However, this is not allowed. So you can not do that on anything else than the first parameter. I mean, you can do it on the first one and the second one and the third one, but once you start using name parameter, you cannot skip one anymore. You have to keep using name parameters. There's a null safe operator now. This is quite useful. It takes getting used to a little bit. So before PHP 8, let's imagine that we want to get all the posts from a certain user on, let's say, a discussion forum. We could do session get user, which would give us the user object, and then we would be able to get the posts from that user. Oh, there's actually a mistake in my code here. This the second line was supposed to be user, not user ID, obviously. So we could check if the user ID is different than null, if it's set basically, then we could get the posts. In PHP 8, you can do all of this in one single line. You could just do session user, get user, and then use the null safe operator, which would check if that first part was null. And if it isn't, it would continue by fetching the post from it. There's a new functionality, and I think Damien already talked about it, called match. So this is a typical switch case statement. We're switching, we're checking the drink here. We're checking if it's a certain piece of string. Oh, I made a huge mistake here. Wow. Sorry about that. I modified that. There's supposed to be break statements everywhere here, of course. Okay. There's supposed to be breaks in here everywhere. I don't know why I did that. In any case, imagine there's break statements. This is the normal way you would build a switch statement with the breaks. In PHP 8, you can actually do this. So you would use match on the same variable, and then you could do simply e.g. Earl Grey, CC, Coca-Cola, and so on. Multiples can be specified with commas, and then you still have a default which works in exactly the same way as you'd expect with a switch case statement. So this is really easy if you are just trying to match one specific string and want to return another string or another value as an output without doing any additional processing within the switch case. Okay. So another new feature in PHP 8 is attributes, also known in many other languages as annotations. It's basically a way to add metadata to functions, classes, whatever you can come up with, basically, without the use of doc blocks. So we've used, in PHP, we've used doc blocks for many years. There are certain standards that you can stick to, but it's kind of cumbersome to fetch the data from in there in a programmatic way, especially because some people tend to derive a little bit every now and then from those standards, as we can call them. So attributes are an attempt to fix that. And so the syntax for that is anything like a function, you can add an attribute in front of it. And this is the syntax: two smaller than signs, followed by your attribute, which we'll get to in a minute, followed by two greater than signs. So if we look at a bigger example, here we have a couple of attributes that we'll use. In this case, we use a use statement to basically access them. And then we can assign them to a class, to a property in that class. We can assign them to a method in that class. And as you can tell, we can both have attributes that are completely empty, as well as attributes that have parameters as well. And then you can use reflection to get more information about each attribute. In this case, we're doing it on a class. So we have new reflection class, we give it a certain class name, and then we can do get attributes. So if we take this example, so the top part is an attribute we actually wrote. And to indicate that this is an attribute, there is a specific built-in attribute called PHP attribute. From that point onwards, this class is considered to be an attribute that you can use somewhere else. So as you can tell, you can actually write code in there, of course. You can have a constructor that does certain things. And then in your actual program code, you can use that attribute and assign it here onto the class foo with parameters. These parameters, of course, will be passed on to the constructor. So if we do a reflection class of our foo class here, and we get the attributes, we can loop over them and say, okay, give me the name, give me the argument, and it's going to actually output the values that have been given. So this is an easy way of dealing with attributes and processing all those things, which is a lot more convenient than using doc blocks. More new features for PHP 8. Constructor property promotion. So this is the way a typical class would look like in PHP 7. So we have a class, we have two properties, one is a brand, one is a string, and then we have a constructor where we provide the brand and the string, and where we actually set those. Really useful, works fine, has been working fine for a very long time. However, PHP 8 provides you with a little bit of a shortcut. So here we have the same class, we have a constructor, but we don't have those properties on top or above the constructor. Instead, what we can do in the constructor is specify public or private or protected, and we don't even have to assign anymore. So the whole code on the left is automatically done on the right. Everything is assigned, and we don't need to define them yet again. There is a couple of notes though. This is not allowed. You cannot specify the property and then basically define it as public again in the constructor. That will conflict, so that's not allowed. You can do this. You can still specify in that constructor a default value, just like you would in a normal property definition. And of course, you can still put code in the constructor. It doesn't have to be empty. You can still do a whole lot of things inside the constructor as well. So it's a shortcut, but it doesn't stop you from doing everything you did in the past either. There's a new type in PHP 8 called the mixed type. I would say it's when you really don't know in advance what type you're going to need, that's when you use it. For example, as a parameter, you could say, okay, I have a class, I have a specific method in there called bar, and I don't know what I'm going to receive as parameter type here, so I'm going to say it's mixed, because it could be an int, could be a bool, could be a float, and I'll deal with it within the code here. Same thing works as a return type. A method could return something. In this case, it could return a bool or an int or a float or a class of some type. It doesn't really matter. Other modified behavior, and this is definitely backwards incompatible completely. Not that the others weren't. Most of them were incompatible as well. PHP before version 8, when you do a try catch on the catch, when you specify the type, you also have to specify a specific variable that you're going to use. Now, whether you're going to do something with that variable or not doesn't really matter. You have to specify it, which also means that it's going to basically take up memory, and it's going to require processing. Even if you don't do anything with it, you're still you're still initializing it. PHP 8 doesn't require you to do that anymore. You just specify the type on which you want to catch the exception, but you don't need to specify any variable name anymore. Of course, if you write this type of code and then try to run it on PHP 7, it's going to complain that it's missing a variable, obviously. This is a very small one. There is now an alternative for get class. In PHP 8, you had PHP 7, you had to do get class on an object. In PHP 7, you could not do this. You could not say : class, which you could do on the class name itself, but not on the object. In PHP 8, you can do it on the object as well. There are some new string functions, and I particularly like this one. It's a very small change, but still, I think it's going to help some people. So when you use string pass, by default, it will return the position at which it finds the specific piece of string that it's looking for, or false. That's been the case since the early days of PHP. Since PHP 8, we have a new function called string contains, and that will just return true or false. And there is also string starts with and string ends with, which can be useful, well, obviously to check whether it ends with or starts with something. Instead of having to do complicated math, I mean, for string pass, start with was easy, string end, well, slightly more difficult. So this will definitely help a lot of developers. Something that changed in terms of working with abstract methods in traits. So if we look at this code, we have a trait that has a method in there. And that method has a parameter of the type string. And it returns a Boolean. And then we actually have a class that uses that trait. But as you can tell, the parameter is not defined, the type is not defined, and the return type is not specified. This was valid in PHP 7. This is no longer valid in PHP 8. So in PHP 8, you will have to define that method as having a string for the first parameter and returning a bool. They do have to match with each other. So the implementation has to match the trait. Same thing goes here for an abstract method in an extended class. So we have a class foo that should be abstract. Sorry about that. Don't know why that went missing. I had to rewrite this entire presentation for PHP 8, obviously. A lot of things have changed. So we have an abstract class foo, which defines a method which has a standard class called things. And then we have a class bar, which extends foo. And there we modify the parameter and say that it's an array. That also conflicts, and that's actually not a good idea. Before PHP 8, you would get a warning. In PHP 8, it will throw a fatal error. So that's something that should not happen anymore. So a couple of months ago, about a little over a year ago, actually, there was a call for participation that was launched by Nikita Popov, one of the core developers of PHP. And he asked for a lot of help to add a lot of annotations to internal functions, to the arguments and the return types. Luckily, this was followed by a lot of people helping out. And this means that the internal documentation of PHP itself and the internal functions is a lot better now. And this has a lot of direct effects on people working with PHP core internally, as well as some side effects on PHP as a language to the developers as well. One of the things that's really nice is that you can now get type errors on internal functions. So any function that you can call that is not user-defined can now also throw a type error or even a value error, not just the ones that you wrote yourself. So that's a useful thing to have. It will help you debug. It will help you know what's going on a lot better, and it will help you avoid making mistakes when writing code, of course. Now, what is that value error? Well, a value error is the following. So let's imagine we are in pre-PHP 8, so PHP 6, 5 or 7. I was going to say 6 almost. PHP 7, we have string pass here. We try to find start in start this and we say, okay, start counting on character number 100. Then normally what you would get in PHP 7 is warning, the offset doesn't, that offset 100 cannot be found in this short string. And of course, pass would be false, logically. In PHP 8, that's going to throw a value error. And it's not just on string pass, it's on basically almost anything that has to do with positions or values that are out of bounds, anything that relates to that. So this is a new type of error that you can catch them. There are many warnings from PHP 7 or earlier that are now catchable errors. I'm not going to go through those. It's 3 pages full of things that you can now actually catch in your code. That used to be a warning, that are now exceptions. In some cases, there are notices that have become warnings. So things have changed quite a bit. It's worth maybe going through them, but it's quite a list of 3 pages. Another change, the default error reporting level used to be by default e-notice and e-deprecated. It's been turned into e-all now. That means if you have display errors enabled on your production environment, it means a lot of errors might show up that previously didn't show up. So, well, obviously it's not a good idea to enable display errors on production, but just in case you have been warned that they will show up now. So there are certain things that PHP will be a lot stricter on. So in PHP 7, if you did something crazy like a var dump of this, you would get an int 0. Or if you try to take an object and multiply it by 5, you would get a PHP notice and it would output 5, which, well, you could say makes sense or doesn't make sense. It shouldn't happen. You shouldn't be doing this. In PHP 8, you will get a type error, which is kind of what you'd expect because you should not be able to do this kind of thing. Some other changes we've seen. JSON, the extension JSON is always available by default now. So you don't have to put it in your composer JSON anymore that you want the JSON extension. It's always going to be there. PDO has changed a little bit. By default, it's now going to throw exceptions instead of giving warnings. So that's a critical one to realize. The ampersand, the so-called silencer, it will no longer silence fatal errors, no matter what you try to do. Display startup errors is on by default. Again, this is one, if you have startup errors and you have display errors on, then you might want to, well, you might want to consider that you might get errors all of a sudden now in PHP 8. The crypt function requires the salt parameter. This is one of the many, many functions that have changed in terms of how they behave. Assertions throw an exception instead of a warning by default. However, you can still reverse this. So it just depends on what you want to do. I personally prefer to get an exception so that I can handle it instead of getting a warning. And there's a whole lot more. I will post these slides online anyway, but there's 2 big URLs where you can find all of the changes that will be in PHP 8 listed with a lot of explanation, which is really, really useful to go through. This is what I just described is a very short list of the changes in PHP 8. If you go to those URLs, you will see many, many more. So the question is, should you upgrade? Well, today, no, because PHP 8 is not out. It's going to be out in about 2.5 weeks. But should you upgrade then? Well, let's talk about should you upgrade to a newer version of PHP. Because even if you're running 7.2, it might be a good idea to start upgrading anyway. In the past, the end-of-life strategy for the PHP project was kind of, well, we'll see. We don't know. There's no rules. That's no longer the case. For a while now, we've had a strategy where 2 years of bug fixes will be done after the release, regular bug fixes, and then an additional year of critical security patches. So that means if you're running a certain version, you have 3 years in total for security patches. In practice, that means, let's say 7.1, well, it was released in the end of 2016. It's already end of life. 7.2 is end of life. 7.3 will actually be end of life next month already. 7.4, well, that's still 1 year to go. So basically, if you're running anything lower than 7.4, you should start upgrading because 7.3 is going to be end of life next month. Doesn't mean you have to go to 8.0 immediately, but it might be a good idea to go to 7.4 already. You don't want to postpone upgrades for a number of reasons. First of all, security, of course, which is probably the most important one. Secondly, performance. Every single version has performance improvements. Also, if you want to use the latest version of certain frameworks, but not just frameworks, but also the latest version of PHP Unit or any other big libraries, they try to stick to following the latest versions of PHP as much as possible now. So Symfony 5, Laravel 6 requires 7.2 and higher. And of course, for developers, we all like to work with the latest tools, so it keeps us motivated if we can work with the latest releases. So it's a good idea to keep upgrading your code. There's 2 different paths that I've seen throughout the last 20 years, which is the old path, which used to be, well, we'll upgrade when it really comes down to it, or we'll upgrade when we buy new servers, which is usually once every 5 years or so. The problem with that is the steps that you take to upgrade, all those different steps, well, you will forget them. You will forget some tiny things that you need to modify. Plus, even if you document everything, that documentation might not be useful anymore in 5 years' time. Let's take, for example, the switch from sysv init to systemd on Linux. Well, part of your upgrade steps will have changed. Plus, it's a massive task to upgrade everything. Every single environment, every single server, doing that is a huge task, and it usually gets pushed further and further back so that that one upgrade every 5 years quickly becomes one upgrade every 6 or 7 or 8 years. So it makes a lot more sense to upgrade almost every release, because what you'll have to do is automate those upgrade steps. And then you can integrate those with continuous integration, continuous deployment steps, and automatically your documentation will be in your automated flow. So there is no issue anymore in terms of, oh, I forgot how to do this, or I haven't done this in a long time. Am I not forgetting anything? No, you run it continuously, so you know it will continue to work as well. or your continuous integration environment will tell you that it's not going to work on the next release. So you have basically a couple of options to do the upgrade. If you have code that has unit tests, you can run those unit tests. But, well, if you have older code that might not have any unit tests at all, option number 2 is you can start visiting every single page on your website with every single possible parameter in there, and then check your error log. Good luck with that. You could, of course, record your visits, then replay them on the test environment, or put a proxy in front of those two environments, and then check whether PHP 8 gives you new errors that you didn't see before, and so on. Option number 3 is you can use static analysis. Now, Damien already talked about Exacat being able to detect quite a bit. There's a number of other tools that were already discussed as well. There's things like PHP Stan and so on as well. So I'll talk about one that's specifically designed for compatibility issues. So about 10 years ago now, I was working as a PHP architect at the Belgian Railways. We had lots of legacy code with PHP 4 style code in there, having been written by well over 40 developers, lots of projects, and basically code written in different styles, written in different, with different methodologies and so on. And the challenge was migrate all those 40 plus projects from PHP 5.1 to, at the time, 5.3 was the latest release. And that was my challenge. And I didn't want to go through more than 40 projects and test every single page manually to find out every single problem they had. So I thought, okay, let me automate this. And let's use the continuous integration environment, because we did have a couple of projects with unit tests. Most of them didn't, but we had a continuous integration environment, so we could use it. And I decided to use a tool called PHP Code Sniffer. Now, PHP Code Sniffer, it used to be a pair package, but it's been on Composer for quite a while now. And it's a tool that most of you probably will know. It allows you to detect coding standards violations. So it's usually used to tell you, hey, you have an if statement here, but your curly brace at the back, it should be on a new line, or it should be on the same line, depending on your coding standard. Or you have tabs instead of spaces, and we want to use spaces. So that's what it was designed to do. It supports multiple standards so that you can theoretically use different standards for different projects, which I wouldn't recommend. And it does its analysis using static analysis. So it's going to run without executing your code. It's going to interpret and split your code into different tokens. For example, T open curly bracket is a token, T false, T semicolon, and so on. And it will parse each file separately. Let's have a quick look at what that looks like. So I have an installation here, and I have a piece of magnificent code that is definitely not PHP 8 compatible. And it will also not run on PHP 5. It's sort of a mix between PHP 5 and PHP 8 and PHP 7, things that don't work anywhere. But I just want to demonstrate Code Sniffer first. So PHP Code Sniffer, I installed it already. Instructions are not that hard. It's a Composer package. So I can have a look at, for example, PHP CS-I will give me all the coding standards that have been installed on my system. I hope this is readable enough. I don't see any comments on that. So I have quite a few coding standards right here. And let me say I want to use coding standard PSR 12. Well, I can use -- standard equals PSR 12. And I can run it across my test file. And it's going to evaluate that test file, and it's going to give me a lot of errors here and warnings. So for example, it's complaining that my opening brace should be on a new line, on line number 2, which might be true. Oh yeah, it is not on a new line here. Okay. And so it's going to give warnings and errors and mention for each file that it checks. I only checked one file now. It's going to mention which line and what the actual error is there. Spaces must be used. I use tabs apparently just to test this thing. So there's a couple of parameters, a couple of options you can give here. -I shows you which standards are available. -P shows you the progress. This is very useful if you have a very big directory. Like, you should never run this on your vendor directory, of course. But if you have a lot of code, thousands and thousands of files, do -P. Otherwise, it's going to seem as if nothing is happening. You can use -S, which I can quickly show, which is actually going to give you the name of the internal standard that was violated in this case. You can ignore warnings, you could be more verbose, and you can also run it in multiple cores simultaneously, which speeds it up quite a bit. So PHP Code Sniffer was what I wanted to use, and I wrote a standard in there called PHP compatibility. And PHP compatibility has only one purpose, not to find out whether you're using tabs or spaces, but only to find compatibility issues across multiple PHP versions. It will detect anything from deprecated functions and extensions to INI settings that are not allowed, anything basically that has been changed within the PHP language, anything that we can detect using static analysis. It works on PHP, well, it used to work on 5.0. It works on 5.3 and above now, although you need 5.4 for the latest Code Sniffer integration, which is really recommended. So how do you make it work? Well, there's a composer package. It's PHP compatibility /PHP-compatibility that you can just install in your required dev in your composer.json. And then if you're using PHP compatibility as the only Code Sniffer standard, you can add this piece of JSON to your composer.json and will automatically set it as the required standard to use. Otherwise, you can use one of these two composer packages to install it automatically. So, and then we can run, of course, that's using that standard. So we can see whether the standard is installed. I see it right here. It's PHP compatibility. And so I can say standard equals PHP compatibility and then give it my test file. Now, when I run it like this, it's always going to try to check for compatibility with the latest version. And I have PHP 8 release candidate 4 installed. So it's now going to check whether my code in test.php is compatible with PHP 8, the release candidate. And so you can see indeed that I have, for example, a declaration of a PHP 4 style class constructor on line number 17, which is correct, probably. Yes, there we are. I have function foo in class foo, that's PHP 4 style constructor. So it will tell me exactly where it is. Some important notes, as I mentioned before, large directories can be very slow. It is advisable if you do scan a directory to use -- extensions equals PHP so that you don't scan JavaScript files or images or videos or anything else. And so you can specify PHP or PHTML or whatever you're using for your PHP files. If you're testing for PHP 8 compatibility, it's advisable to use PHP 8. Certain functionality can be tested without having the actual version on your system, but some of it will only work if you have the actual PHP version installed. Again, it's static analysis. It doesn't actually run the code, which means it cannot detect every single incompatibility. It can only detect the things that it can see while it's analyzing, not the things that happen on runtime. And it will provide you a file name and a line number, as you just saw. Now, by default, as I mentioned, it checks for the latest PHP version. However, you can specify a different version to test. This can be useful, for example, if you are developing on your local machine using PHP 8, but your production environment is still running 7.2, then you might want to see if the code that you are currently writing will actually work on your production environment. And so the way you do that is by specifying -- runtime set. I want to test version 7.2. Now, if I run it, it's not going to complain about 8.0 stuff anymore, but it's going to complain about these new functions that I talked about before, which are not present in 7.4 or earlier. So in this case, it tells me the code I just wrote in my test.php here, this code will not work on my production environment that's running in 7.2. So it works in both directions. There's a couple of extra rule sets. By default, PHP compatibility will check for everything. It will run through its rule sets, and it will give you errors or warnings on everything that it finds. However, for example, WordPress has specific rule sets that do not give warnings on certain specific items. WordPress, for example, has code in there that still will work on PHP 5, and so you might not want to get a warning on that specific piece of code every single time. And so there are a number of rule sets that are able to work on specific installations of Joomla, WordPress, and a couple of other things. There's also some integrations that you can find. For WordPress, there is a PHP compatibility checker built into WordPress. It actually uses PHP compatibility behind the scenes, but it can actually tell you before you upgrade PHP, it will actually tell you, hey, this plugin that you're using will not work once you upgrade your PHP version. So you have to upgrade the plugin first or look for a different plugin, because otherwise your site is going to break. PHP Storm has built-in compatibility inspection. It has support for PHP compatibility. There's PHP 7cc, which has similar functionality, although it's slightly less up to date. There's no PHP 8 support in it, as far as I know. Of course, there's Execat, which we just saw Damien give an excellent talk about, which has a lot of checks as well. They actually complement each other, I would say. Execat has certain things that PHP compatibility doesn't do yet, and the other way around. There's Fan, there's PHP Stan, of course, and there's a Docker image actually that uses a whole bunch of them and gives you output across the whole board of every single incompatibility that it finds using a number of those tools. So, conclusion, this doesn't provide you 100% detection, but if it can provide you 95%, you will have saved a lot of time, of course. My advice is install it on your local machine, run it, check to see what you have as incompatibilities, fix those, and then install it on your continuous integration environment so that you are ready for the next version of PHP, and not just 8.0, but 8.1, 8.2, and so on. So start upgrading. And I know she's there. She's in the chat right now and following this. I want to say a big thanks to Juliette, who has been the main contributor with almost 100% of all commits in the last couple of years. If you have any issues on CodeSniffer in a project that you have, feel free to contact her. She's an absolute wizard on that. She can definitely help your company out with that. And that brings us to questions, I guess.
Yeah, well, first of all, a round of applause for Wim. Yeah, sorry, it's just me clapping, but imagine everyone is behind their screen clapping. We do have a couple of questions. Let's go to the Q&A mode. Here's one for the match function. What will be the code mat if you have a lot of case statements, each on a new line?
So if you have a lot of case statements with, let's see, each on a new line, yes, normally you would still do each on a new line, except when, of course, you want to, let's imagine that there's 3 cases that should lead to the same result, then you can just comma separate them. Otherwise, I would put them on a new line.
Okay, well, I hope this answers the question, Jan Willem. Next one. I saw Juliet already answering this question in the chat. What's the point of typing mixed over not adding a type?
That's a good question. Maybe Juliette can repeat her answer.
I'm
I guess
scrolling back.
Yeah, go
ahead. No, it was the.
Wasn't her.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't an answer on this particular question.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see. Psalm will not complain about a missing type. That's a good point. If you run something like Psalm across it, it's going to say, okay, you specified it's mixed, then you knew what you were doing. Whereas if you don't specify it, it's like, hey, you forgot to specify it. You should. So yeah, I think that's the best answer.
Okay. The reflection info fix on PHP core make name arguments work on core functions, right?
That's a good question. I honestly don't have an answer to that. That's an interesting one.
This is from Tom van Looy. You probably know Tom from the various meetups and conferences that we have seen each other.
Yes.
So maybe exchange some contact information and get back to him later on.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. This is a big one from Jasper. Example on the named arguments between quotes slide. You have a public function underscore construct public string $1, public string $2, public string question mark string 3 is null, public string 4. Are optional parameters allowed to be in the middle of the signature before the required parameters in PHP 8? Or was this a typo on your named argument slide?
So are optional params allowed to be in the middle of the signature before the required params in PHP 8?
Well, from what I know from PHP is that the optional parameters always have to be at the end. Otherwise, you will get an error or an exception being thrown.
Correct.
So
there was more than one error on that slide, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
By the way, about the name parameters, they do work on the built-in PHP functions.
Mm.
But this one is probably a typo. I would have to check it out.
Okay.
But it's probably a typo.
Well, I will send this question to you so you can follow up on it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Damien tried this one. I'm not going to repeat it. You can see it on the screen. Yeah, Damien, I think that in your career, you probably have seen quite some crazy things. So, yeah, most people don't actually do this, I think. But, yeah, there might be people that do this. Because PHP, right?
Yeah.
And then Damien says again, and I have to say that, oh, it doesn't work. Yeah.
I don't understand why it doesn't work. I mean,
yeah, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. Anyway, I think that is all. I think, yeah, we're through. That's all the questions. Yes, Ahmed, let me go to his question. This one is for me. This meetup is recorded. It is already live on YouTube. The moment that we close it on YouTube, it's available on YouTube. And this recordings we will provide at some point in parts on the YouTubes and the Facebooks and all the other platforms that allow video to be shared. So stay tuned, and we will notify you about this. Yeah, it looks like we're at the end of this session. At least, thank you, Wim, for everything that you explained about getting ready for PHP. So I'm very excited. I'm already migrating a whole bunch of things to PHP 8. Just because it's PHP 8, and as you can see, I'm really excited about it. I didn't know it was the 26th, so I marked it in my calendar now. So I have to update my countdown display and so on. But enough of the talking. I think I will take over from you right now, and I think it's time for a raffle. Just before I let you go, you can stay in during the raffle as well. Hold on a second, wrong button. You are now the sponsor of the raffle, and yeah, as a raffle owner, I'm going to send on your behalf the elephants that you donated, and we will make sure that these elephants reach the destination. Whoever wins the elephant, it's not just the elephant. You get like all the goodies, including the PHP 8 gimmicks that we have, including some nice new things that we have for PHPBenelux, like key change and all kinds of things. So it's going to be a real party pack for you winning it. I see people already drooling. So I'm just this crazy guy, and I decided, like, here we go. We've got PHPBenelux key change. So now you can walk around and never lose your keys or your YubiKeys keys or whatever. Who has these whiteboards in their home office? Because now everyone is working from home. We've got these magnets. So now you can put up your Kanban boards on your whiteboard using magnets without sticking it with duct tape. So awesome stuff that you will get. Let me share my screen. Where do I? This is the right button. I need to have my wheel of names. All right. Everyone can see the spinning wheel. This is the actual list as it is like 5 minutes ago before Wim closed his session. So these are all the names that are in this room. So everyone who is now present has a chance of winning a box. And we have 2 boxes to give away. So I go for the first name, clicking on the right window. Mark Walravens. So congratulations. All right. So you will have the first pick of the elephant color. It's blue and pink, right, Wim? Yeah.
Sorry, it's two blues.
Two blues. Okay.
Two of the original blues.
Two of the original blues. That's even better. Okay. Ooh, we got another winner. Fritz. So what I suggest now is that Mark and Fritz contact us at meetup at phpbenelux.eu. So we have your contact details, and we can arrange shipping to your home office or whatever you are currently occupied. And that concludes the session for today. You probably don't know it, and you probably cannot see it, but we're actually here with a team behind the scenes. I'm here in my face, but let me show you. We have the core team behind the scenes. Yeah, there you go, Wim. So we're actually with a whole bunch of people behind the scenes, making sure that this works. If you have any feedback for us, so we can improve these sessions, let us know, because for us it's a constant experience, learning things, and your feedback is important. But your feedback is also important for the speakers. So I would actually invite you all to go to join in. I will send out the link in a second. Let me grab it right now. Join in, and I will put it in the chat here. There you go, PHPBenelux virtual meetup. And here you can actually provide feedback for both Damien and Wim, so they can improve their talk. I know they did an awesome job. Maybe there was something that you were not able to read properly on your small screen or a different screen, or you have a suggestion to make it better. Please leave some feedback. Now, Join In is the CI system for speakers, and your feedback is important for those people to improve and get better. And a nice thing is you can also provide us with feedback on how we can improve the organization of these meetups. That's it. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening. Happy holidays for the time being, and all celebrate the release of PHP 8 on November 26th. So thank you all from the whole team, and see you next week, next month. It's always the second Thursday of the month. So December 10th is going to be the next meetup. So goodbye, have fun, and see you all. And that's a wrap.